so I was observing and then subsequently evaluating educational innovations and so on. And then, along the way, 10 years later practically, I bumped by chance into Gestalt. I was consulting to a particular program for university teachers. And I did this program, this Gestalt element of it. It was part of the smorgasbord of different things. And I fell in love.
So what was it that you fell in love with to start with Gestalt?
I think it was probably the emotional directness, the truth-telling. People just saying what was going on for them.
Right, so Gestalt, I don't know much about Gestalt. Is it like normally a one-to-one session, or is it a group therapy, more like session? How does it work?
Well, Gestalt as a philosophy and as a school of psychology started as an experimental school way back in the roughly 1910 to 1940 was its great period, and it was a very dominant movement in psychology. In contrast to behaviorism, which was all about trying to break down and explain things by trying to analyze all the little bits and pieces that come together. Gestalt was more interested in studying whole phenomena. Gestalt is a German word that means whole.
Okay, so when you say whole, what do you mean by whole?
Well, the Gestalt of a person in German, the Gestalt of a person is their whole appearance, their whole demeanour, their whole way of coming over. Rather than taking one part of the person, say, examining just their memory patterns or their physical readings, so that Gestalt was and is a profound philosophical approach of a holistic doctrine, if you like, and then it got translated or reinvented in a sense as Gestalt therapy round about 1950, and that has developed into and has spawned a whole variety of different practices and methods. So yes, there is a lot of one-to-one work, but Gestalt is also used in organizations, in groups. It's been used in educational settings. And its main practice, at least in Britain at the present time, is in the field of psychotherapy. But also, I've more or less given up all of that work, but I still carry on as a Gestalt coach, so that I'm still using the practice. Just as other people are working in organizations, they use the practices and the ideas, although the actual way that they work in each setting is slightly different, obviously.
So, what did it do for you, Gestalt, personally, when you first got involved with it?
Well, for me personally, I think the greatest thing was that it started me on what I call my journey from head to heart.
Okay, from head to heart, good, yeah.
I was very much in my head, and obviously I came from a kind of background of using my head as a way of managing myself. And then I realized that there was another way to manage myself, to be, and to feel and to sense with my body, and to be in tune with my emotions rather than keeping my emotions in some kind of box and just trying to go with my talking and my head stuff. So that was probably the biggest change for me. And of course it was a shift of career, which was also huge, because I absolutely knew that I wanted to do this work.
It must have been quite exciting in those times, because it was something very new, especially in in Britain, wasn't it? And you
Yes.
learnt this in America, or you heard about it in
Yes.
America, and you came back with this
Yes.
new way of working, if
in
you like.
1980.
Yes, yeah.
And there was a little bit of Gestalt already going on in this country. There'd been some early work. I mean, in the growth centres, there was quite a lot of Gestalt. Can't remember their names right now, but they're very well-known ones that were around in the 70s. But it had kind of...
Quasitor and Kaleidoscope, was it?
No.
It's a name like that, Crazy, anyway.
Yeah, them.
Yeah.
But it really had fizzled pretty much by 1980. There were just one or two people, like Gay Houston, who's still alive and very well and practicing, who were doing things, but not many. And really in the 80s, it was about mid-80s when quite a lot of Gestalt programs and institutes started getting going in this country. And I was in on the ground floor, and I was part of setting those up, some of them anyway. And it was an exciting time. What's happened since, jumping ahead again, but it's like what's happened since is that it's become much more formalised. And now you can get MScs at universities in Gestalt psychotherapy. And in that process, it's lost something as well as gained a lot. I mean, it's become much more rigorous, it's become much more professional, it's become more ethical in terms of what people are expected to, standards they're expected to comply with, and so on. But we've lost in the process a lot of the excitement and the energy of those early days.
Because I guess it was experimental to some degree when you came back to England with it and started to work with it. Okay, you had your training, but I guess there was certain ground rules, but it was an adventure of taking it and you weren't sure where it was going.
Absolutely, yes. We were flying by the seat of our pants, which I think became a bit of an art form for us.
Yeah, tell us more about that, how that worked for you, flying by the seat of your pants.
Well, it's a very Gestalt notion for me.
Okay.
Because part of another piece of the Gestalt approach is this incredible attention paid to the present moment, being here now, and focusing on that. And which means that to plan something like a curriculum and a training program, and when people should do various things, is in a sense a counter to that sense of being totally in the present and going with where the energy is in the moment, and where what's fresh and vital and exciting in the moment.
Yeah.
So there's always been, I think, since then, a little bit of a tension between the need to organise and to lay on a proper training and so on, and yet trying to preserve some of that excitement of the present moment. So it's and it was a tough time in a sense as we got going, and lots of competing organisations and all the usual things. I mean, Gestaltists are just as bad as everybody else, despite their emphasis on relationship and connecting and contact. They aren't necessarily any better at managing institutes, and so there's been a lot of fragmentation, which is part of the individual creativity as well, and which has gone into the making of each training program around the country.
Yeah, and it's also a very human thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To go off, you have an idea, and you go off and explore it. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Zen Buddhists are the same, of course. Thousands and thousands of Zen traditions or practitioners and many different traditions within that.
So you were then working as a Gestalt therapist?
Yep, and a trainer and a supervisor, and I still carried on doing some work in organisations.